Hi, I'm Ilkka from Frameright. Today we'll look at integrating the image display control React component into a Next.js project. The IDC React component also works with vanilla React and toolings like Vite. The component is based on the image display control web component. So if you use other frameworks like Vue, Angular, or even vanilla JavaScript, you can get the same benefits. I'll put links into the description, so go and have a look. But now let's get started with the React component and Next.js. As a starting point, I will be using the block starter template from Vercel. So first, let's install the template by running npx create next app, and then we'll provide the template as a parameter. I've already done that, so I'll skip that step, but after you run it, you should see a block starter app appear in your terminal. So let's open that. And the first thing we want to do is we'll npm install all the dependencies in the project. And we'll also npm install sharp, which Next.js will use during the production build. And it might complain that it doesn't exist if we don't install it. It's an optional thing, but it's good to have it there. And then let's have a look at the project itself. So the blog is fairly straightforward. All the blog posts are stored as markdown files in the posts folder, and they have a title, they have a body text, they have a date, and they have a cover image. And if you want to follow along, feel free to duplicate any of those posts already in there and configure it to your likings. So I've done that already on my computer. I've created a post called the choice of image display control, and I've also given it today's date. And that's maybe a good way to get it to appear on the top of the blog listing, because the blog will list all the posts in a chronological order from newest to oldest. So that's a good way to get it on top of the page. And I've also given it a custom image, and we could go and have a look at the image and how does it look. So it's in the public assets folder, and here we have the picture I'll be using. And one thing I immediately notice is that the shape of the picture is vertical, and if we compare it with the other posts here or other pictures for the other posts, which all have like this 16:9 type of ratio. So that's likely to give us some issues that we will be solving today. So let's jump into the terminal and let's start the development server. And this gives us the website on localhost 3000. So immediately we see the picture is very tall compared to the other ones, and that's something we will be fixing today. But another thing I want to be fixing is the behavior of all of these pictures, and I would want them to have an aspect ratio of 3:1 on a wide screen, 2:1 on a medium screen, and then 1:1, aka a square on the mobile view. So let's implement that and let's see how that works. And we'll find the image handling in the cover image tsx file. And here we immediately see that Next is kind of like expecting us to give it a image that's almost 2:1 ratio, but nothing else. It will accept all sizes of images, but that's kind of like how it will then try to fit them, and when they don't fit, we see what we get. But we'll turn this into a more of a responsive behavior. So to do that, we'll first wrap the image in a container. We'll be using a div here, and then we will add some classes for this. And the template we used uses Tailwind CSS. So we already have some existing classes that we can reuse for this purpose. So we'll first give the container a relative position, but then we also have these aspect ratios that we can do. So we'll say an aspect ratio of 1:1, a square for all the pictures, and then in the medium viewport we'll say aspect is 2:1, and then in the large viewport we'll give it an aspect ratio of 3:1. Here we go. Then we'll take the image file or image element and we'll give it a fill is true value and an additional CSS styling so that it will use the picture to cover the whole element. So let's look at how that looks. And perfect. So now we have what we wanted, the 2:1 images on the wide screen, 3:1 on the smaller screen, and then a square on the mobile screen. But obviously we see a problem here because we don't have a way to tell Next or the browser which part of the picture we would actually want to see in the 2:1. So, and this is something that image display control will help us solve. So let's get started with that. And before we do that, we'll just add a few more additional optimizations for this. So we'll give it a sizes attribute, let's say min width is 1540 pixels and 90 view width. So we're saying it that if the viewport is bigger than 1540, the picture should have the size of 1400 pixels, and otherwise it's about 90% of the width of the viewport, which is close. Of course, you might want to optimize this further depending on your site. And then we'll also give it a priority so it gets rendered immediately because it's above the fold. All right, so now let's go here and let's get started with the IDC component. So I will want to install the Frameright React Image Display Control package, and while it's doing that, we will have a look at the docs.frameright.io. So the documentation for the React component has a section of importing into your project, and for the Next.js project we have this additional requirement that we have to add this code into our next.config.js file. So we'll go and do that, and if the next.config.js file doesn't exist, we then create it in the project. So next.config.js, and we drop that in. And in the meantime, the package was installed, perfect. And then we will bring it into the cover image file. Image display control from our package. And all we now have to do is that we wrap the existing image in the image display control tag. We could also wrap IMGs or anything that resembles an IMG as a sourced attribute and so on. And we're almost ready to go. We just need to add one additional point. So we need to tell the image display control element that we know what we're doing. So we will set style is contain paint, which will optimize its behavior, and the image display control element will normally set it itself, but because this is a React project, we will get a warning about the virtual DOM and that we have been touching it. So instead of the element doing it itself, we do it manually here. So it's just one additional line we need to add to the wrapper. And then as a guarantee for the component, we also tell that we've actually done this and we know what we are doing. So we will add the data IDC parent boolean attribute. Now we're all set to go. So the only last thing that we're missing now is actually some regions. How do we tell the picture like how it should behave? And we can always provide it with a data image regions attribute now. And this will take an array of different coordinates, crop definitions for the picture. These can be coming from your database or another pipeline or wherever. But what's really cool with the IDC is that they can also come from inside the picture. So let's do that here. So we don't need to provide it with anything. And instead, I have a version of the picture we saw earlier. This came from our CEO, Marina. She has already added some image regions inside the picture. So if we open up Frameright.app and we sign in, and then we drop in the file, we see that the image actually carries already these 3 different crop versions of this picture, telling it how it should behave in those situations. So we have 3:1, 2:1, and 1:1. And of course we could, with the Frameright.app application, we could add a Facebook original image, for example, or something else. But in this case, I think we're good to go with what we have. The 3 sizes we wanted, and we have it. So let's just take the file and let's replace the previous file. So it's exactly the same file. It only has a little bit of additional metadata in it in the IPTC photo metadata fields. So that's an open standard anybody can use, and we're using it here to convey these image regions across different systems. So let's go back and let's start the development server again, and let's see what we have. And perfect. So this was a way that allowed Next, with the help of the image display control React component, to read these display instructions from inside the picture. We can provide them ourselves, but definitely the most convenient, necessary way is to put it inside the picture file itself. And if we go back to our terminal, we will see that the IDC component is giving us a warning that we haven't told it where does the file live. And this is because Next is doing also server-side rendering, which is possible with the IDC component. But for it to be able to do that, it has to know where the file lives in the file system. So we'll just tell it that. So we'll give it one more additional attribute, data path on server, and they lived in the public folder, and then they will be in the source attribute. And this fixed our problem. So the last step we have and we can do is we can actually build the project, and we can have a look at the final result. So here we go, production build, super fast, super simple way to bring in the benefits of Frameright and IDC into your next project. And we can still have a look at the Lighthouse results, and we see we still get a 100 performance score across the board. So a very nice way to improve the quality of your images on your Next.js projects. So that was a quick tutorial on how to integrate the image display control React component into a Next.js project. I will leave all the links in the description, so go and have a look. And also please let me know in the comments if you would like to see more of this type of content, or if there is a specific framework you would want us to have a look with the IDC technology. And if you enjoy this content, remember to subscribe and like the video. Have a great day. Ciao!